Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. America now has a new president, and that has a lot of people asking, now what? The Democratic agenda will take shape first in the House of Representatives, and here this morning to discuss what's ahead is Congressman Chris Pappas. Thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Good morning. Great to be with you, Adam.
So before we look forward, let's deal with what is still a very serious situation, the attack on the U.S. Capitol. You voted to impeach the president, but what should be done about your colleagues who potentially abetted that mob? If, for instance, there's a rep who granted a tour to people who later entered the Capitol to try to harm senior members of the chamber, or even former Vice President Pence, should that member be expelled from Congress?
Well, yes, if there were any colleagues that were involved in the events that led up to and resulted in the violent attack on our Capitol, absolutely, they should be held accountable and they should be expelled from Congress. But we need a full investigation, and it needs to involve both law enforcement and our intelligence services, as well as the relevant oversight committees in Congress. I think we are going to see a bipartisan 9/11 style investigation in Congress into the events of January 6th, the radicalization that we've seen in our country, and the violence that came to the doorstep of our democracy. Anyone who is responsible needs to be held fully accountable, including and especially elected officials that should be focus on how we can move our country forward, addressing the problems of this nation, making sure to protect our democracy. That's why it was important that we took the action that we did against President Trump by impeaching him and sending that to the Senate to ensure that we're saying that he should be accountable for his actions and drawing a bright line that no president should use that kind of language or incite that kind of violence against our Capitol. So, we really need to make sure that we are holding folks accountable, that we're realizing justice. There continues to be a number of arrests being made all across our country from individuals that participated in the events on January 6th. We need to be able to turn the page, but in order to do that, we need accountability.
So you've got all that military protection in Washington. Now it seems a little bit like no one quite knows what to do with them. What's happening here with what we see with some of the guardsmen being forced into a parking garage where they're staying with only one bathroom? Who would have banished them like that?
Well, I don't know, and we're going to get down to the bottom of it, but it appears that was reversed late last night by the Capitol Police. And look, for those who are responding, the 25,000 National Guard troops, local and regional law enforcement that have been part of the effort to secure the Capitol, to allow the inauguration to go forward and to keep people safe, we owe them nothing but respect and the dignity that they deserve. I know they have access to hotels and meals. We worked early on to make sure that cots were brought into the Capitol so that if they were resting while they were in the visitor center or in the Capitol, they could do so comfortably. And we've indicated that our office is open to any Guard members from New Hampshire or beyond who need a place to bivouac or rest while they're on duty defending our nation's Capitol. So clearly there was a breakdown somewhere here. This was corrected very quickly. And as we go forward, we've got to focus on, the necessary protections that need to be in place, protocols that need to be improved. We saw early on the resignation or firing of the Sergeant at Arms in the House and the Senate and the Chief of the Capitol Police. Clearly, there was a breakdown at the leadership level, and we need to focus on how we can shore that up so that we're respecting the service of our Capitol Police officers, Guard members, and others who are responding. We owe them nothing but the best.
We know you're going to be fighting for those $2,000 stimulus checks to individuals in the next round of pandemic relief, but let's talk infrastructure. President Biden has indicated he wants to spend more than $1 trillion rebuilding American infrastructure. When you're looking at your own district here in New Hampshire, CD1, what are some projects in your district you would like funded if that bill comes to pass?
Well, there are so many, and I hear about this from local elected officials, from state elected officials. We have our 10-year transportation plan in New Hampshire, but that's really limited to our roads and bridges and systems of transportation. When we're talking infrastructure, we have to look beyond transportation to our electric grid, our water systems, broadband, the things that can put people back to work and create the backbone of success for our businesses and for our communities moving forward. Some of the projects that we hope to find support for in the infrastructure package include the Capitol Corridor Rail Project. We need significant federal support if we're going to get that project off the ground. That could be an economic game changer for New Hampshire. It's a really popular project supported by the business community. We need the political will in New Hampshire to move the ball forward on that. That process is underway to identify a funding mechanism for it. but federal sources are very important. Some of the other priorities I have in the bill include broadband funding. I talked this week with Majority Leader Jeb Bradley about his legislation to create a state match program. We'd like to see some federal dollars coming to New Hampshire that could help do the mapping work that needs to be done and deploy the wires to underserved areas of New Hampshire. And in addition to that, I've got legislation that deals with expanding our investment in bike and pedestrian infrastructure to really improve the quality of life and create the kind of connections we want to see locally and regionally here in New Hampshire. So this is a tremendous opportunity, not just to rebuild what we have, but to do it for the future, to do it in a clean and green way, in a way that grows our economy. And I think we're going to have a tremendous partner at the Department of Transportation under the leadership of Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He had his hearing this week in Congress. I think he'll be confirmed. He's a local guy who understands complex systems, and he also knows New Hampshire. And so I hope there's an opportunity to bring him here to help spotlight some of these local projects that we hope get addressed in the infrastructure package and have the attention of our national leaders.
12 years ago, you had the backlash that developed to the stimulus and the Affordable Care Act. What's going to be your response in the weeks and months ahead when you start to hear people say, and this is going to come, I think, from a number of areas, the government is spending too much money?
Well, I think we need to be concerned about outlays, certainly. But if you listen to Janet Yellen, if you listen to Jay Powell and other experts and economists, they're saying the risk right now is not doing enough and perhaps being in a period of low economic growth, a period of extended increased unemployment unnecessarily if the federal government doesn't act in a significant way. We saw an important compromise at the end of the last calendar year between Republicans and Democrats on COVID relief, support for our businesses, our unemployed, our workers, our working families. More needs to be done. And I know President Biden, has announced a framework for COVID relief. There are important provisions in there, including more money for vaccination. We're seeing delays all across the country in deploying the vaccine and ramping up production of critical materials. We need congressional action to help support the administration's efforts with funding to make sure that we're moving as expeditiously as possible to get everyone vaccinated and protect vulnerable populations in our country. In addition to that, I think there are some easy things we could deal with early. The $2,000 checks, which already passed the House, had the support of 2/3 of Republicans and Democrats in the House. Let's bring that up for a vote today to help provide the kind of economic relief that people are looking for. In addition to that, state and local funding is another crucial area. I'll be talking with all the mayors from around my district later today. They have significant concerns about both increased costs that they're seeing as a result of COVID and decreasing revenues. And so this is hurting local budgets. And it's really coming into focus now that we're entering budget season. And I think we need to provide some additional support to allow them to respond to COVID and also deal with these shortfalls. We've already seen 1 million educator jobs lost across our country, more public service workers, including our first responders, our police officers and firefighters, may potentially face job losses if we don't backstop these local budgets. That's got to be part of the bill. And I helped lead a letter with Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania this week, calling on House leadership to do that. So I think we do need to go big. But look, if we can deal with some pieces now, like checks, support for vaccinations, state and local funding, I think we can garner broad bipartisan support for it.
You were one of just 6 Democrats in Congress to recently vote against the federal decriminalization of marijuana. This caused quite a bit of consternation among the Democratic base back here in New Hampshire. Explain your vote.
Well, I'm a supporter of descheduling marijuana at the federal level and allowing states like New Hampshire to chart their own path. I think that is sensible policy. And in addition to that, I think we've got to look at this as a racial justice issue. I had some concerns around the timing of this vote. We were wrapping up our work for the year. We hadn't seen a negotiated package be brought to the floor on COVID relief. That was our top priority. And this was a bill that wasn't going to get taken up in the Senate. And I thought we needed to clear the decks to focus on COVID relief, this public health crisis and the economic recession that people were experiencing. In addition to that, I had some concerns around the federal expungement provisions in this bill. This deals not with state level offenses for marijuana possession. This deals with some bigger drug charges at the federal level. And I wanted some more information about what this expungement process would look like, who would be eligible, and making sure that violent offenders, including those who trafficked substances and distributed substances like heroin and fentanyl and opioids, wouldn't be eligible under this legislation. So I think we can fine-tune this and move forward a bill that respects the will of the states to do what's right and set their own policy on this. And I think it's time the federal government got out of the way. We have other opportunities to consider legislation on the marijuana front. One is a bill that passed the House last year, which would allow local businesses that are involved in marijuana-related business to get access to the banking system. That passed the House. I think we'll see it taken up in the Senate this year. That's a common sense step that can help our economy and public safety moving forward.
All right, Congressman Chris Pappas joining us from Washington. Thanks so much for your time on Close Up. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Be well.